Hello and welcome back. Today is something a little bit different. We will look at those serving time for taking the life of police officers. But let's get straight into the cases. And first we start off with Gary Nelson. On the 17th of February 2006, Gary Nelson was convicted of taking the lives of William Danzo, who was 31 years old and a doorman and security guard, and Patrick Dunn, who was a 44-year-old police officer. In October 1993, William Danzo was a doorman at the Brixton Academy, and he refused Gary Nelson entry to the nightclub, and on the day that he passed away, he was working as a part-time security guard at a shop when he broke up a fight involving Nelson. It was heard that Gary Nelson targeted William Danzo for disrespecting him. He and two unidentified males laughed as they fired shots at William Danzo in his hallway in Clapham on the 20th of October 1993. At the same time, PC Patrick Dunn was investigating a domestic dispute and heard the gunshots from William Danzo's house and went to investigate. He was an unarmed policeman. As he stepped into the street, he was hit by a single shot. He lost his life. Nelson was originally charged with taking the lives of both of the men 5 weeks after they took place, but the case was dropped because of insufficient evidence. In 1994, Gary Nelson was jailed for 8 years for an unrelated shooting. He lost his temper when a van driver tried to overtake him on a road in South London. This infuriated Gary Nelson and he got out of his car and fired 5 times at the fan, hitting the bonnet and the radiator. 10 days after starting his sentence at Belmarsh Prison, he attacked prison officers and had 6 months added to his term. He was released in 1999 and the police decided to put surveillance on him. They conducted this in February 2003 and they followed Gary Nelson to the United States, where he bought a laser device and other add-ons for guns. Police swooped in on his flat in London and seized the weapons and the devices. They were described as being designed to make the gun a more efficient weapon. In January 2004, he was jailed for life for possessing weapons, ammunition for a second weapon. While in prison, he was charged again with taking the life of William Danzo and PC Patrick Dunn. The evidence against him was the discovery of the weapon in Wandsworth Cemetery in South London, which was found wrapped in a plastic bag. It had Gary Nelson's mother's fingerprints on it. During the trial, he was brought up to court every day from nearby Belmarsh Prison. He was found guilty and was sentenced to life. He will serve a minimum of 35 years. Next we move on to David Bieber, also known as Nathan Wayne Coleman. He was born in the United States. He was a US Marine and then was discharged. He became a dealer and bodybuilder. On the 9th of February 1995 in America, fellow bodybuilder Marcus Mueller was shot and had his life taken in Fort Myers. Police arrested Bieber thinking he had hired a hitman, but later released him due to a lack of evidence. In the same year, in November, Bieber's former girlfriend Michelle Marsh was attacked by the same person who had attacked Mueller. All the shots missed. At this point, Bieber fled the United States and he got the identity of Nathan Wayne Coleman. Nathan Wayne Coleman was a child who had passed away in the 1970s. In 1996, Bieber entered the United Kingdom through the port of Ramsgate, Kent, using a false passport. He was given a 6-month visa, but this was extended when he married Denise Horsley. By 1998, Bieber worked in a nightclub in Yorkshire as a doorman. He also acquired lots of illegal firearms. In 2001, his wife petitions for divorce. On the 26th of December 2003, on the border between Gipton and Oakwood areas of Leeds, an unarmed traffic policeman, Ian Broadhurst and Neil Roper, saw Bieber's stolen BMW car parked at the junction of Grange Park Avenue and Dib Lane, where Bieber had just been into the post office. They identified the number plates as false and asked him to accompany them to the police car, where Bieber sat in the back seat. The officers did not attempt to search him or handcuff him. However, they became uneasy and called for backup. Roper then moved to handcuff Bieber, who was facing imprisonment for various offences mentioned in the Star in the US. He was frightened about getting extradition to the US. He drew a weapon and fired 4 shots at the officers who tried to flee. Roper was hit twice in the shoulder, but managed to get away. Broadhurst was shot once in the back and immobilised. PC James Banks, who had arrived as backup, escaped injury after a bullet hit his radio. While Ian Broadhurst was lying, Bieber walked up to him and shot a 5th bullet, taking his life. After this, Bieber escaped down Dib Lane and stole a car at gunpoint outside a betting shop further down the road. On the 27th of December 2003, Bieber took a taxi journey in Bradford, and on the 28th of December, armed police raided Bieber's apartment in Leeds. Bieber was arrested by armed police at the Royal Hotel in Dunstan, Gateshead at 2:25 a.m. on the 31st of December. He had dyed his hair red, and under his bed he had a loaded pistol, which was later determined to be the weapon used. He also had 300 rounds of ammunition. The next day he was charged with the murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. The trial began on the 2nd of December 2004. Bieber denied murder, 2 counts of attempted murder and possession of a firearm with intent to endanger life and possession of 200 rounds of ammunition. Bieber admitted possession of 298 rounds, found when arrested without a firearm certificate. The prosecution presented evidence from witnesses, identification of Bieber's voice and DNA evidence. Bieber's defence was that the culprit was his friend who looked like him, also from Florida, that committed the offences and had asked him to look after the weapon. Bieber said he could not name this friend for fear his life would be taken. Bieber was convicted on 1 count of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder, and if he is ever released he will be extradited to Florida, where he faces charges relating to the murder of Marcus Mueller and the attempted murder of his former girlfriend Michelle Marsh in 1995. On the 23rd of July 2008, Bieber was told by the High Court that he would not have to serve a whole life term, as originally recommended by the trial judge, but would still have to serve a minimum of 37 years before being considered for parole. On the 10th of August 2017, Bieber attacked prison officer Alison Smith at Long Lartin Prison with a homemade weapon. He was given an extra 6 years onto his sentence. Now we move on to Mustaf Jama. Sharon Beshanivsky was a police officer for 9 months. She was previously a community support officer with the West Yorkshire Police. On the 18th of November 2005, Sharon and another officer, Milburn, responded to reports that an attack alarm had been activated at a travel agent on Morley Street in Bradford. The 2 officers arrived and encountered 3 men who had robbed the agent of around £5,405. 2 were armed with weapons. One of the men immediately fired at the police officers, fatally wounding Sharon in the chest and also hitting Milburn in the chest. All 3 men made a getaway in a convoy of cars. On the 25th of November 2005, police named brothers from Somali, Mustaf Jama, who was 25 years old, and Yusuf Jama, who was aged 19, as well as a 24-year-old called Mustaka Imat Shah as prime suspects. Yusuf Jama was arrested in Birmingham the following day and was charged with murder and robbery. On the 12th of December, Shah was arrested in Newport, South Wales. He was later charged with murder. Mustaf Jama had fled to Somalia but was extradited 2 years later. Just before the crime had taken place, automatic number plate recognition technology was installed in Bradford city centre, which played a major role in identifying the culprits who were charged. 14 years after the crime, in January 2020, another suspect was arrested in Pakistan. Pirandita Khan, who was aged 71 at the time of his arrest, was reported to be wanted for masterminding the robbery. British police were granted his extradition in April 2023. Previously, on the 18th of December 2006, Mustaf Jama was found guilty of all charges against him, including taking the life of Sharon. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 35 years. This was expected to keep Mustaf Jama in prisons until at least 2040 and at the age of 60. Shah was also sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 35 years. 2 other men were also arrested. One was given life imprisonment with a minimum term of 11 years for being the lookout, and another was given life imprisonment with a 20-year sentence for being the getaway driver. On the 1st of November 2007, Mustaf Jama was extradited from Somalia after a Home Office-funded snatch operation that involved his Land Rover being ambushed by 15 men, and then Jama being flown by private plane to the UK via Dubai and taken into police custody at a station in Leeds. He was charged the next day with taking the life of Sharon and appeared before Leeds magistrates and was remanded in custody. On the 22nd of July 2009, Mustaf Jama was found guilty of murder and was also told that he would serve at least 35 years in prison, which means he is expected to be kept in prison until 2044 and would be the age of 64. It later transpired that he had been released from prison. He was previously convicted of burglary and robbery offences just 6 months before Sharon lost her life, and that he had been considered for deportation to his native country. The planner and the mastermind of the robbery, Pirandita Khan, fled to Pakistan. A reward of $20,000 was offered for information leading to his arrest. He was arrested in Pakistan on the 14th of January 2020, and he was remanded in custody. On the 10th of May 2024, the court sentenced him to life with a minimum term of 40 years. Mustaf Jama's brother, as well as the other culprit Shah, had 4 years added to their sentences as they were put in the same prison. They attacked another prisoner with intent in Franklin Prison in 2008. They all remain in prison. Now we move on to Kamel Bourgass. On the 14th of January 2003, police officer Stephen Oak, along with other colleagues, went to flat 4 in Crumpsall Lane in the area of North Manchester as part of an immigration operation. The resident was not expected to be there, but the police found 3 men, including Algerian illegal immigrant Kamel Bourgass, who had arrived in England in the back of a lorry 3 years before. Stephen Oak and the other police officers didn't recognise Kamel Bourgass, who was actually wanted in London in connection with a bioterrorism plot to attack the London Underground, known as the Wood Green Plot. He was not perceived to pose a threat and wasn't handcuffed by the officers. However, believing that the officers had identified him in connection with the plot, Bourgass made an attempt to escape and in the process of doing so, punched one officer and picked up a weapon. Stephen Oak, who was unarmed and not wearing protective clothing, went to restrain the suspect, but was stabbed, including one blow which went to his heart. Despite his injuries, Stephen continued trying to help his colleagues bring Bourgass under control. 3 other officers suffered wounds before the suspect was eventually detained. Stephen Oak later passed away. A street in Manchester was renamed Stephen Oak Close in his honour, and in 2006 a memorial statue was put in the location where he passed away. Kamel Bourgass was convicted at the Old Bailey on the 29th of June 2004 for taking the life of Stephen Oak and of the attempted murder of 2 other police officers, as well as wounding another. He had claimed that he had taken Stephen Oak's life out of fear, but was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 22 years, plus an additional 15 years for the attempted murder charges. He appealed against his conviction in July 2005, but it was upheld. A second trial in connection with the bioterrorism plot concluded on the 8th of April 2005. He was convicted of conspiracy to commit a public nuisance by using poisons or explosives and sentenced to an additional 17 years. He was originally incarcerated at Franklin Prison, but in July 2008 other inmates set fire to his cell. He then moved to Wakefield. It was reported in 2009 that he was recruiting fellow extremist prisoners to communicate with undercover Al-Qaeda operatives in London in relation to a new poison plot. In February 2011, a High Court judge rejected an appeal filed by his lawyers that segregation procedures taken by prison authorities breached his common law rights and human rights. The segregation followed allegations that he was trying to exert control over other prisoners, especially fellow Muslims who he pressured to attend prayers. He was also suspected of being involved in organising an assault on one prisoner who needed lots of stitches. He remains in prison. Next we move on to Ikechukwu, Obih. Police officer Jonathan Charles Henry was reporting on shift on the 11th of June 2007. He responded to a 999 call reporting a random attack on George Street in Luton Town Centre. A window cleaner, Stephen Chamberlain, had been stabbed in random. Jonathan Henry approached the suspect from behind to attempt to arrest him, but the suspect turned around and attacked him. As he laid on the ground, he was attacked a second time. Another window cleaner, David Knight, struck the suspect over the head with a window cleaning pole. Police backup officers then used a baton round and 2 shots from a taser to subdue the suspect. Jonathan Henry was taken to Luton Hospital by ambulance but passed away of his injuries later that day. Obih was a paranoid schizophrenic who was 29 years old from Nigeria. He was convicted of taking Charles Henry's life on the 26th of March 2009 and sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 25 years. He abused alcohol and other substances, and from 2004 said he heard voices and had hallucinations. During his trial, the jury heard how he believed that he had special powers, could predict the future and could make something explode just by pointing at it. He also distrusted the police. He denied the charge of murder but admitted manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. The jury rejected this defence and found him guilty of the murder, the attempted murder of Chamberlain and the wounding with intent of the other window cleaner. He was also convicted of aggravated burglary and assault occasioning actual bodily harm in a separate incident on the same day. The judge accepted his schizophrenia was a mitigating factor in the case and recommended that he receive psychiatric rehabilitation at a high-security mental hospital, and that is where he remains. Now we move on to Dale Cregan. He was jailed for 4 murders, including those of 2 police officers in Greater Manchester. He admitted taking the lives of police officers Fiona Bone and Nicola Hughes in a gun and grenade attack, as well as father and son David and Mark Short. He also admitted the attempted murder of John Collins, Michael Belcher and Ryan Prudom during the attack on Mark Short at a pub in May 2012. Fiona Bone was 32 years old and Nicola Hughes was 23. They were on a routine patrol on the 18th of September 2012 when they were sent to Abbey Gardens in the village of Mottram in Greater Manchester at around 11 a.m. following a report of a burglary. The telephone call was made by the public, which was later found out to be made by Dale Cregan, who had led the officers into a trap. After the 2 police officers arrived at the house where the burglary had been reported, they came under attack, with 32 gunshots being fired from a pistol within 31 seconds and 1 hand grenade being used. Fiona Bone died at the scene while Nicola Hughes was badly wounded and passed away later in hospital. Cregan was arrested by police after walking into a police station in Hyde an hour after the 2 officers had their lives taken. Cregan was wanted in connection with the murders of Mark Short, who was 23 years old, and was shot in Cotton Tree Pub on the 25th of May 2012, and of his father David Short, who was 46 years old, who had his life taken in a grenade attack at his home on the 10th of August 2012. Cregan pleaded not guilty to the murders of the two police officers. In February 2013, it was revealed Cregan had celebrated the night before with a beer and cigars, since he knew it was his last night of freedom. He walked into a police station after saying he'd done 2 coppers, because police were hounding my family. While Cregan stated that his only regret was that he took the life of 2 female officers. On the 13th of June 2013, he admitted in court that he took the lives of the 2 police officers. He was found guilty of 4 murders and was sentenced to life imprisonment. He was handed a whole life order. In August 2013, it was reported that Cregan was on a hunger strike at Full Sutton Prison. He was moved to Ashworth Hospital in September 2013. He was transferred back to Manchester in March 2018 from Ashworth, where it was reported that he had boasted about his workout regime and access to snooker and tennis. In December 2024, the 2 female police officers were awarded the Elizabeth Emblem. Now Stephen Draper. Police officer Raja Ahmed was a part-time law student and a very experienced police motorcyclist in the traffic unit of Greater Manchester Police. On the 31st of August 1999, Raja was on a motorcycle patrol in Miles Plating in central Manchester when he saw a suspected stolen Vauxhall Nova. Also in the stolen car were the driver's 27-year-old girlfriend Sandra Reynolds and her 2 daughters. Upon seeing the police officer, the attacker reversed suddenly, forcing the officer to manoeuvre his BMW motorcycle between 2 cars. The suspect then drove at the motorcycle, ramming him 82 feet forward into the busy road junction. He was struck by a car. He was taken to hospital, but Raja unfortunately lost his life. The driver of the stolen car was 28-year-old Stephen Draper, who was on probation for various vehicle-related offences, including theft. He had appeared before the courts on 24 different occasions, including once after he attacked a police officer with a screwdriver. Draper denied taking the police officer's life, but pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of causing death by dangerous driving. He was convicted of murder by a jury of 7 men and 5 women at Manchester Crown Court and was sentenced to life imprisonment on the 30th of June 2000 for causing his death. On the 20th anniversary of the crime, on the 31st of August 2019, a new road near the place of the crime was named Raja Ahmed Street to honour the police officer. Now we move on to Barry Prudom. On the 17th of June 1982, 29-year-old police officer David Hay was attempting to serve a summons on a poacher in a valley in North Yorkshire, when police officer David Hay failed to respond to a radio call from his station. Police officer Mick Clipston was sent to check on his whereabouts and discovered his patrol car at a picnic site at the Norwood Edge. The door of the car was still open and the police officer was next to it. He had his life taken. The police officer's clipboard was found, on which he had written Clive Jones, born 1810-44, Leeds, NFA, followed by a vehicle registration number. The police cleared the poacher and cleared a man called Clive Jones from Leeds of any involvement. North Yorkshire Police then launched an investigation. The registration number recorded by David belonged to a metallic green Citroen, which police said had been the subject of a cash sale to an unknown man in London in January 1982. A witness soon came forward to say that he had seen the car parked at the location at around 6:35 on the 17th of June. On the 23rd of June, 8 miles away, Barry Prudom broke into a home. The occupants were 52-year-old electrician George Luckett and his wife Sylvia, who was aged 50. The married couple were tied together at their elbows and were shot. George Luckett passed away and Sylvia survived, although she was left with permanent brain damage and no clear recollection of the incident. The next day, on the 24th of June, Prudom was stopped during a routine check, around 8 miles from the home that he had robbed, by a police dog handler, police officer Ken Oliver. When police officer Ken Oliver asked him to step out of the vehicle, he opened fire with a pistol, the first round hitting the officer's face. Barry Prudom got out of the car to fire again. The police dog reacted by attacking him, giving the officer a chance to run for cover in a nearby house. Of the 7 bullets that hit Oliver, none were fatal. The dog was also shot twice, but survived. Barry Prudom had given Hay a false name and no address. He had given his true date of birth. Another officer, Martin Hatton, cross-checked outstanding arrest warrants and made the connection between Hay's written note and the birth date of the suspect, Barry Edwards. The police searched the address given by Edwards and established his true identity. For several days, Prudom hid in the countryside. On the 3rd of July, he entered the home of a pensioner, Maurice Johnson, in East Mount, and took him, his wife Bessie, and their son Brian as hostages. He ate a meal in the Johnsons' home, which he described as the Last Supper, and hid out at the house for 11 hours. As the night went on, we got talking as though we had known each other for years. He was calling me Brian, and my father he was calling Dad. Prudom gave Brian a gift of a United States Army paratrooper ring, and then, believing the area was safe, tied up the family and left the house at 3:15 in the morning on the 4th of July. Having learned from television reports that police officers were assisting, Prudom set a false trail leading away from the Johnsons' home, then headed back and hid in a makeshift shelter near Malton's tennis club, only 300 yards from the police station, which was also the headquarters for coordinating the manhunt. Around 2 hours later, the Johnsons had managed to free themselves and called the police. Police found his hideout. A firearms squad from Greater Manchester Police were called to the scene, and he was told to give himself up. Stun grenades were thrown by police, and on hearing a gunshot, the police officers opened fire. When this stopped, the police went into the hideout and found that Barry Prudom had taken his own life. Next, on to David Parfitt. Police officer Gerald Walker lost his life in 2003. On the 7th of January, Gerald Walker was dragged 100 yards and fatally injured by a stolen taxi as he reached into the vehicle in an attempt to remove the keys from the ignition. He passed away in hospital 2 days later from his injuries. In December 2003, 26-year-old addict David Parfitt was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 13 years in prison. He had been on licence at the time of the incident for a previous robbery offence. In September 2005, a memorial stone for the police officer Gerald Walker was unveiled at the junction of St Albans Road, close to the location of the incident. Police officer Gerald Walker was a dog handler, and a dog show has been held annually in Long Eaton in memory of him since he passed away in 2003. The police station in Bulwell where he was stationed has been named the Jed Walker Building. Now Glaister Earl Butler. Police officer Michael Swindle was attacked and had his life taken while pursuing his suspect, known to be armed with a kitchen knife, in Birmingham. The suspect, Glaister Earl Butler, had used a knife earlier in the day to threaten a carpenter carrying out routine repair work on a garden gate outside his council case. This led Michael Swindle and some of his colleagues later encountering the suspect on a park bench, then pursuing him down a towpath for over half a mile. The officer's colleagues administered first aid but were unable to save him. The suspect was 48-year-old Glaister Butler, who suffered with paranoid schizophrenia, who resided in a council-owned maisonette in Birmingham. He was convicted of manslaughter. He had been charged with murder, but the jury accepted his defence of diminished responsibility. He was detained indefinitely in a secure psychiatric hospital. Police officer Michael Swindells was awarded the Queen's Medal. The Police Memorial Trust erected a stone memorial to him in 2008 at the location of the incident. Next is Louis de Zoysa. On the morning of the 25th of September 2020, Louis de Zoysa, who is 23 years old, was arrested for drug offences and possession of ammunition and taken to Croydon Police Station in a police vehicle. Police Sergeant Matt Ratana was approaching the suspect to assist in a search. The suspect then fired 3 shots, shooting the police officer twice, before being tackled to the ground. During the struggle, the suspect fired a 4th and final shot, actually striking himself in the neck, causing brain damage. Police officer Matt Ratana was taken to hospital, where he passed away. No police firearms were discharged during the incident. A non-police revolver was recovered from the scene, which had been missed in the initial pat-down of the suspect. The suspect was in handcuffs during the incident, with his hands behind his back. CCTV captured the incident taking place. The weapon was a Colt Model 1989 Navy double-action revolver. The suspect had it holstered under his armpit. The background of the suspect is being investigated by authorities. He had previously been referred to the Prevent program, an anti-extremist program developed by the government in an attempt to prevent individuals from becoming radicalised. The 23-year-old was arrested on the 13th of November. He was considered well enough, though still requiring hospital treatment after himself being wounded by one of the bullets fired during the shooting. On the 29th of June 2021, he was deemed well enough to be formally charged with murder. On the 28th of April 2023, he pleaded not guilty to murder whilst appearing in video link from a hospital. He was due to stand trial at Northampton on the 6th of June 2023. His lawyer argued that he has Asperger's syndrome and was experiencing an autistic meltdown at the time of the shooting, and was therefore not guilty of murder. Following his trial, he was convicted of murder on the 23rd of June 2023. He was sentenced on the 27th of July 2023 to life imprisonment with a whole life order. Now on to our last case, and that's the case of Khalid Masood. On the 22nd of March 2017, police officer Sgt David Winter was in New Palace Yard guarding the Palace of Westminster. He was unarmed. Khalid Masood, who was 52 years old, drove a car into pedestrians on the pavement along the south side of Westminster Bridge and Bridge Street, injuring more than 50 people, 4 of them fatally. He then crashed his car in the fence of the palace grounds at around 2:40. The police officer was then approached by Khalid Masood, who was armed with 2 knives. Keith Palmer confronted him in an attempt to stop him. He fatally injured the police officer during this encounter. By confronting Masood, the police officer delayed him long enough for his armed colleagues to arrive and shoot Masood dead. Police treated the attack as Islamic-related terrorism. Masood said in a final text message that he was waging jihad in revenge for Western military action in Muslim countries in the Middle East. Police have found no link with a terrorist organisation and believe Masood acted alone. Keith Palmer was a supporter of Charlton Athletic and held a season ticket. The club honoured him by replacing his regular seat at the Valley Stadium with a white chair bearing his warrant number, P204752 Palmer. He was also awarded the George Medal for confronting an armed terrorist to protect others and Parliament. In recognition of his sacrifice, the Met Police Service retired his shoulder number 4157U and stated that it would not be reissued to any other officer. His name has been added to United Kingdom's Police Roll of Honour by the Police Roll of Honour Trust. He was awarded the Outstanding Bravery of the Year award at the 2018 Met Excellent Awards. And that concludes our video today. As always, thanks so much for watching, and until next time.